Good morning. My project is on rural poverty and inequality. It's my position statement. My name is Holly Donham, and I look forward to sharing with you all of the things that I've learned and discovered as a result of pulling multiple sources together and under the lens of equity, inequality, race, and diversity. So, for over 40 years, research continues to grow in how to best address the social, educational, and economic inequities in the United States. And the War on Poverty was initiated to help decrease the disparities in income and social status, education, and such that existed between various historically disenfranchised groups within our country. And I felt like it was important for us to start here because the war on poverty began to set things in motion when our country began to realize that there was a need to address issues with those who did not have the resources or the supports to be as successful as others in our society. So I chose the overarching theme of race, ethnicity, and equity. Um, I feel like I'm fortunate to be a part of this project in particular because a few years ago I delved into this whole notion of poverty and children of color in a personal professional growth personal initiative that I took on my own when I was reflecting on my practice and working as a relatively new teacher in a very, very diverse district. I had a learning curve to be able to equip myself to better be prepared to teach so that I can maximize the learning potential with the students that I see every day. And so I kind of went on a quest of my own to learn more about poverty and race. Um, our school is one of the most diverse. But let me go back and talk about the summaries. I would also like to brag that I was able to use all of the texts that I had purchased a few years ago um, to do my research or to pull all of this together for this particular project. But I was thrilled that all of these books had themes that were unifying, and so it was a very rewarding project for me. But the first text, of course, I'm drawing a little bit from our course text, which defines what rural means, and it offers steps that can be taken to address challenges, which is the purpose of this project for us to consider what our plan would be to address those challenges in our schools. The next book I want to talk about briefly is called Teaching Beautiful, Brilliant Black Girls. I highly recommend this book to any teacher that is interested in making close connections to be able to grow these young women and not just academically, but to really empower them culturally and acknowledge that they have you know, all of their attitudes and behaviors are founded rather than reacting to them in, defensive ways like sometimes we do. But this book was a real turnaround book for me, and I would highly recommend it. I use it as a reference, almost like an encyclopedia, because it has so many strategies and descriptions, lived experience that was very. I found it to be very real and authentic. It's a great book. Another book was Educational Opportunity in Rural Contexts. I'm primarily using parts of the second half of the book because it contained some very valuable information for my position about the implications of local policy and practice in rural schools. The next book I used was part of a book study that I did with my assistant principal and a few other teachers year before last. During the pandemic, we did a book study called Disrupting Poverty. Great book. The authors used research and classroom experience to dispel myths and to urge educators to act against effects of poverty on students. And they offered some exemplary classroom practices that are currently working in high poverty schools. And so I found that book to be very impactful, and it was very valuable to experience that book with my peers. I felt like I wished that the entire faculty had done the book study, because I think that the results coming out of that book study with our small group was extremely important work that we did as a result of that study. Um, Another book that I had purchased during my own personal quest was called Understanding Poverty in the Classroom. And it helps teachers identify differences in children with resources and with those who lack resources. It revealed realities of how these children live so that teachers can better relate and respond to challenges that are faced by children in poverty. Um, I am fortunate that as a part of my personal and professional growth, I would like to say that my school is one of the most diverse schools in the state. That's why I chose race, um, ethnicity, and equity in order to draw on my own personal experience and, of course, within the context of poverty. While my city is not considered rural, I recognize that race and ethnicity are heavily linked to poverty, regardless of your population of your city. The only thing separating my suburban district from a rural district is the money available and the resources that are available. But many of the other aspects of poverty and such are very similar. So I feel like I can learn a lot from this project. And of course, if I am ever awarded an opportunity to work back in a rural district, I would be very equipped to be able to do that. Some of the challenges that are presented with rural school districts have to do with the social world of children who live in poverty. They have one world outside the classroom, and then they have a very different world that they have to navigate inside the classroom. And just knowing that those are different can be very triggering, very uncomfortable for students. Some of the challenges for children in poverty are a high mobility and constant moving. Often they are transient. And as teachers and educators, we must help students build trust in us and build capacity to be able to cope in their unstable situations. We've got to provide them with tools to feel safe and secure, and how to also navigate when they don't feel safe and secure. Another challenge is overcrowded living conditions. Oftentimes, they have multi generations living in the same place, and it's up to us to help them with contextual skills and to reinforce some new behaviors that allow them to function in an overcrowded living situation. Because while they are growing academically, their living situation is not changing. So they need to learn how, we need to help them learn how to cope. Another challenge is lack of access to basic resources. Of course, that is you would say that is obvious, but we also have to acknowledge that when we are caring for them at school, oftentimes they have inadequate clothing, or they're hungry, or it's an issue of having the right haircut, or there might be an odor. Um, Sometimes children in poverty manage to wear adequate clothing, so you can't really tell that they're hungry, or you can't really tell what their needs are because they try very hard to fit in and to blend in to their environment. More challenges. Of course, inadequate housing and inadequate neighborhoods. It is up to us to help develop programs to help with housing. We need to have ample time for recess, time to use the bathroom as needed. That is a sticking point with a lot of teachers this year, and I could talk a long time about teachers have really strong ideas about limiting their bathroom. But if you have a sensitivity to students in poverty, um, you've got to bend the rules and allow them to go because it's part of their need to feel like they have some capacity, some control in where they go and what they do at school. And it can sometimes be an empowering thing when they know that you understand that they need to leave the room when they need to leave the room. Um, Another challenge is great expectations. Um, do not make excuses or expect less of students in poverty. We just need to provide supports so that they can meet those high expectations. Do not lower the expectations for students in poverty. Diversity of identity. I think this is very important, and this is a song lyric that I wanted to include that just kind of reverberates that person of color and some of the things that they carry with them every day. We've got to address the existing inequities, specifically for Black students. We've got to identify and eliminate systemic oppressive practices for them. And when principals support teachers in this effort, it can have a powerful impact on um, your mission and your vision and the culture that you want to create, particularly if you're in a school like mine that's extremely diverse. Some instructional actions that I believe are impactful to address the racial inequities would be to identify, to know, and be able to present cultural heritage and development studies, um, observations, self studies, allowing students to do these things, oral histories, portraitures, testimonies, literary analyses. Um, you've got to make studies like this collaborative, and you have to intentionally regularize or normalize these learning activities. It shouldn't happen just in February during Black History Month. And you need to create a classroom climate that allows for critical conversation spaces so that children can talk and feel safe and be proud of their own opinions. Also, supporting the learning environment, developing self efficacy with faculty. I think it's very important as a principal um, in group settings like faculty meetings or professional development meetings, even in one on ones. It's important to pass along the fact that we do have control over our outcomes with students. I think teachers sometimes are too quick to think we can't do anything about this. There's always going to be this issue, this poverty problem. These students are, they are kind of hijacked or railroaded, and that we can't make that much of a difference. And that mindset has to change at the core, and it has to start with the principal. So, developing self efficacy with faculty is critical. Also, using ongoing evaluations as a principal to ensure that all students in all classrooms have the tools that they need. And again, that involves surveys, that involves grade level meetings, including an element of, reporting on tools that you would have needed to have better outcomes. Using assessments to create curricula that meets or exceeds standards. Standards should not be the maximum expectation. Standards are the minimum expectation. And so use assessments to create curricula um, to meet or exceed those standards. Use collaborative decision making anytime you can. Have your teacher leadership team be a part of the decision making processes. Also, undergird the value of professional relationships among faculty. Encourage professional relationships. I know at my school, I know who all the teachers are who are working on their national board certifications or they're working on advanced degrees. I know who they all are, and we all talk and share and support each other. And that comes from our principal because he heavily values um, professional improvement and values us having relationships with each other. Also, of course, hiring the best, most qualified teachers, that is critically important, but it's also challenging in a rural environment. Um, you're faced with a unique set of circumstances. It's more challenging, but you can't just accept it. You've got to get creative with it to attract the most qualified teachers, and then continue to develop them to make them better and to grow your teachers so that they'll want to stay and continue the success at your school. Also, value the interaction with students' families. Um, this is a one-on-one thing I think that principals need to show. When they model that, it shows teachers that you value the familial relationships, and that's an important part of building the culture that I want to have at the school when I become a principal. Ensuring equity. You've got to see beyond the poverty, focusing on their strengths, their assets, their cultural treasure troves of knowledge that students bring. Make it a positive. And not only at the classroom level, but at the school level. Um, we try to do a lot of extra school-wide initiatives using our library media specialist and the things that she can do to promote, to help us build on those strengths and assets, cultural funds. We posted an enormous, um, not I guess a bulletin board, flat globe of the world, and every student in the school got to put with a push pin where their family came from. It wasn't necessarily where they were born, but we wanted to emphasize the cultural richness of our school body. And so we had everyone put a push pin on the country or the continent where their family came from. And the students loved coming up and talking about it, interacting with it. It was just a fantastic way of creating a sense of community based on differences. Um, Also, grades and assessment. Rubrics are important for these students. They need to know what the expectation is so that they can meet it. The zero use of zero. This is very important and a practice that I started um, as a result of my studies in poverty 2 or 3 years ago. I do not put a zero in ever, not before a student has completed work and not after a student failed to complete the work. Um, it's mathematically impossible. You cannot come up with a fair assessment of student mastery when you put zeros in. You must eliminate the zero and eliminate the attitude that teachers have about punishing students for not completing work. Teachers should reflect, offer the reflection for students, and redo or retest. Students need to be able to learn how to reflect on their own learning. It's metacognitive thinking is very important for students in rural areas, poverty students, students affected by racial inequities. They need to be able to reflect on how they learned, if they learned, um, why they did or did not, and then offer them the opportunity to redo until they master, making time the variable. What this means is, give them extra time. Don't punish them. Um, many students gain a feeling of control and agency over their own learning when you tell them they have time to get it done. Mastery is the goal. The goal is not rapid completion of assignments. Um, I hope I don't sound like I'm on my soapbox, but I am. Also, using portfolios. When we have a wide range of ways to assess student learning, um, it's empowering to students, and it also does show mastery. Not all students can score well on multiple choice summative assessments, and so it's important to offer a variety of types of assessment to determine mastery of standards. Staff development is also a way to ensure equity. Um, Allowing staff time for personal reflection, expecting them to reflect on what they have done, and then also offer time for them to collaborate and give them support in that effort to continually evaluate what's working, what's not working, how do we backtrack, what are ways that we can reapproach a standard, maybe in a more engaging way. And then finally, the equitable distribution of resources, uh, making sure that those who need it most have what they need. That's what equity is. It's not equal time for all, equal people for all, equal money for all. It's identifying those who need it most and giving them the most. Resources. Of course, in rural communities, you have state funding is at the core. It's the biggest portion of funding that rural schools get, but it would be important for principals to work with policymakers, conducting town hall meetings, encouraging conversation and analysis, rigorous debate. State funding, you can have an impact on it if you have a relationship with policymakers. As a principal, you must do that if you are in a rural community. Also, again, I mentioned hiring the best quality teachers, retaining them. Principals in rural schools have got to recognize this as a major concern and not get caught up in well, my school is going to be a revolving door. I just know I've got to be really good in the hiring process. You got to be really good in the retention process as well. You've got to offer professional development. You've got to help teachers um, flourish and meet their highest potential and give them support for continuing education, particularly toward advanced degrees, and get creative to help make that happen. Technology resources. Again, it's also a challenge in rural schools because they often do not have access to fast internet. They have to rely sometimes on hotspots or no internet at all, and so they miss out on what they need to have technologically. And you must provide faster, cheaper tools for anyone, anywhere to innovate, collaborate, create. It's not just the school-age students that need it. In these rural communities, their parents need it. The businesses have it. So working with the businesses to figure out how we can get it into these households. Um, it's hard conversations, but you have to advocate for it, because if you don't, it's certainly not going to happen. Community involvement. Um, there are so many ways to get a community involved with your school initiatives. But I used an example from one of my texts that I thought kind of encompasses at the core um, the elements of how you include a community in involving them in an initiative. And this particular one had to do with growing the Head Start program, which is a preschool program for children who are below a certain um, socioeconomic status. But one of the ways that you can involve the community is to make sure that all preschool children are attending a Head Start or a church-based or a home-based development program, with the ultimate goal of getting all preschool children into Head Start, where they can have curriculum, where they can have trained staff, where you can begin preparing them holistically, socially, emotionally, and pre-academically for success as they enter kindergarten. Another important way to involve community in this effort is to create a council to oversee the Head Start program. It was like a board, of, if you will, and it was made up of all stakeholders. There were some parents, teachers, community members, um, a wide array from all walks of life. Um, Not only, people, you don't have to have a child in Head Start in order to have an interest in the Head Start program. When you promote it as a need for your community, and people can buy in and they see how important it is to have a preschool, what it leads to ultimately, and the impact that it could ultimately have on a community, then you get whole community buy-in, and people are knocking on your door and emailing you to get involved. So you've got to get yourself out there to promote your initiatives so that the community knows what's at stake, and also what the potential is for success. And then the third element of community involvement with this Head Start program um, was to also think about providing educational opportunity, thinking about transportation, offering transportation for people that didn't have reliable transportation. Sometimes that's an issue in rural communities. Offering money for books, and this would be for teachers that that you want to grow them in their knowledge to be able to better equip these preschool children. This was an initiative that provided transportation for teachers, and ways for them to get to the local community college to be able to get associate's degrees in preschool early childhood development and courses of that nature. My plan for adequate support, I think it comes down to providing professional development for my teachers, um, coaching my teachers, modeling actionable feedback, support, um, continued analysis, and adjusting the plan as needed um, in order to create poverty disrupting classrooms. Um, so that teachers learn to be intentional about fostering relationships. Teachers learn to have empathy for students. Um, they learn to differentiate their support based on the needs of the individual students, so that they can do all they can do to level the playing field. Um, Teachers need to take on professional accountability, and you need to teach this. Uh, They need to feel like they are on the same team with their students. Teachers confront their own biases and blind spots working to eliminate conditions that perpetuate underachievement in their schools and their districts. There are things that we can change as teachers. I'm living proof of that, to eliminate underachievement. I would like to make a note on this slide that lessons and initiatives must continually be evaluated, and it's okay to change. Some teachers say, oh, we're always changing things. We never keep anything anymore. We're always got to go to the new next thing. But we've got to make sure that we are continuously engaging students. And sometimes that does require change or even just tweaking what we're doing. Decisions have to be based on data and analysis of methods and rules. Pedagogy that impedes student success, we've got to admit it and make changes when there needs to be change. And sometimes that's a hard conversation, but it's all for the students, and it must be done. Sometimes it's hard, but it must be done. My plan for stakeholder advocacy is to work closely with district leaders to improve curriculum and textbook upgrades. We don't want to have outdated texts in our schools. I want to be able to recommend renovations and building projects of school facilities because students need a safe, nice, clean place to attend school. I want to make sure pre-K programs are located at the schools to provide maximum convenience, so that if parents already have to bring their school-age students to school, they only have to make one stop because they can drop off their preschoolers there as well. Also, you can maximize your school resources if you have everything in one place. I want to expand hours of operation in order to meet work needs of parents, offering extended day for older students, not just the preschool students, offering high quality education opportunities for all students. Um, you don't need to limit kids that can't go on field trips just because they don't have the money to go. You need to continually enriching all students so that those high achieving students that live in poverty can have that life experience to be able to matriculate and grow and have the highest opportunity for success. I think it's important for a principal to be visible in the community and vocal with elected leaders on the needs of the school. Invite them to the school to familiarize them with needs and deficits that might impede student achievement. I think it's important to establish a local foundation focused on educational initiatives like literacy or dual enrollment or higher education scholarships, anything that they can do to support, except offering remedial activities. I would rather see them focused on ways to open up opportunities for success. Partnering with local community college, industries, businesses to determine what their needs are from from students. You know, what kind of workforce do they need, and offer specific career prep pathways for students, improving career academies or tech schools, knowing what certifications that these students can earn and how early they can earn it, so that we can make that happen and get those students working if that's their goal. In summary, my position is important for students in a rural environment. The need is to respond to a changing global and local economy. Oftentimes, rural communities are changing for the worse. And the need is to respond to that and to avoid that happening. My plan seeks to provide a rigorous education for the highest achieving and the most motivated students, while at the same time offering relevant preparation for stayers, you know, those that want to stay in the community and help grow the community and keep it going. I hope for my school to benefit from a supportive community and influential community members. A thriving school breeds a thriving community. I hope this information is impactful and at least will foster some productive discussions about addressing the unique needs of children of color, particularly those impacted by poverty.